So Donald Trump's long-awaited infrastructure plan is out, and just like the International Business Times warned us about months ago, it's effectively a privatization racket. I mean, that's the whole ideology behind this proposal. So this is from The Week. They say Trump proposes privatizing federal assets, including airports, freeways, and the International Space Station. Goodness gracious. So let me read you this snippet here, and this sums up the plan in a very concise way. In the infrastructure plan, which envisions leveraging $200 billion in federal funds into a $1.5 trillion investment, the Trump administration is pushing federal officials to sell off, privatize, or otherwise dispose of a broad array of government assets, the Washington Post reports, including Dulles and Reagan National Airports, freeways, aqueducts, and electrical facilities in the South, West, and Pacific Northwest. The budget also sets aside $150 million to explore privatizing the International Space Station. So here's the gist of this plan. They're calling it a $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan. Now, it's weird that they're referring to it like that because the amount of money of federal investment in it is $200 billion. Now, I suck at math, but $200 billion, $1.5 trillion. There's a big gap there. Well, how do they fill that gap? Well, they go, well, state, local, something, but also privatization. Oh, okay. So that's how it's going to work. You're basically trying to sell off the commons, things which have historically been considered the public, ours, we all collectively own it. He's trying to sell it off. Listen, there are many reasons why that's a terrible idea. First and foremost would be, why would you want to see our roads turn into a for-profit venture? You want to make it so that you already probably hate the fact that you have to pay the amount of tolls that you do when you go from one place to another place. I've had to pay them. I'm sure you guys have had to pay them. How would you like it if that was multiplied by 5 or 10? And almost every time you turned onto a new main road, you had to pay a toll. How would you like that? You'd hate that, right? Well, then you should be against this plan. What do you think happens with privatization? You're turning it over to a private company, and the private company is not, out of the kindness of their own heart, going to run our infrastructure in a non-profit way. No, they're going to run it and want to turn a profit. So it's a deal with the devil, because you say, the argument is, well, I mean, look, the roads, the bridges, they're crumbling, they're falling apart. What are we supposed to do? Of course we have to update them. But the deal with the devil is, oh, hand it over to Goldman Sachs and they'll pay for people to fix the potholes and whatnot. But, hey, in the long run, they're going to have to turn a profit, so they're going to charge you a lot for that. Well, I have an idea. How about you don't turn it over to Goldman Sachs, you don't privatize it, and you fix the fucking potholes? How about that? They're trying to nickel and dime you. That's the idea here. How are you going to have a $200 billion investment from the federal government and a $1.5 billion infrastructure plan unless you're planning on basically turning almost our entire country over to Wall Street? Oh, what a terrible idea this is. It's such a bad idea. And I need everybody to understand something. You have top Goldman Sachs officials who are now in the Trump administration. One of them is Gary Cohn. Gary Cohn's a top economic advisor to Donald Trump. Gary Cohn not only wrote the tax plan, which hosed the middle class and rigged the tax system in favor of the rich in Goldman Sachs, Gary Cohn got a giant exit bonus. I think it was over $200 million as an exit bonus when he left Goldman Sachs. Well, the International Business Times reported a few months ago that this was and this is how they knew that the infrastructure plan was going to be a scam, is that they were reporting that Gary Cohn behind the scenes was pushing Trump towards, hey, how about we privatize large swaths of our infrastructure and hand it over to Goldman Sachs? So weird how it works. Gary Cohn gets paid hundreds of millions of dollars when he leaves Goldman Sachs, and then he's pushing for a massive infrastructure bill that greatly benefits Goldman Sachs. It's almost like it's totally corrupt, and it's just like Dick Cheney and his Halliburton exit bonus and the fact that Halliburton got no bid contracts from the government when we went into Iraq. But no, you can't say that. You're a conspiracy theorist if you look at facts and you follow the money and you make basic logical connections. So this is what's happening, man. They're hosing you. Privatize the International Space Station. Look, it's part and parcel of their ideology. But privatization is not just part and parcel of their ideology. They're also paid to have that be their ideology. So do you understand there's a big difference there? Somebody can make the argument, and rigid libertarians have made the argument, where they say, hey, listen, philosophically, for reasons X, Y, and Z, I think that privatization is better than having this as a public good. But this is not what's happening here. It's not. They're not saying, I have a principled disagreement with the idea of public infrastructure. No, it's you have massive, massive influence and power being exerted by Wall Street and big money interests. They own the government, and so they're rigging the system further in their favor, which is why, think about it, man, they're coming for the last few things that we have that are public goods that are absolutely necessary. Social Security, that's one of the main ones. Hey, let's privatize it or semi-privatize it. Keep your fucking hands off of that, man. Now infrastructure too. Hey, how about we do a $1.5 trillion infrastructure deal? It's not really a $1.5 trillion infrastructure deal. It's really a $200 billion infrastructure deal. And then we just turn our infrastructure over to Wall Street. Well, listen, even if you're a conservative, you should be against this. I mean, there's already been stories. They've opened up national parks to mining, to energy companies to try to extract from these lands. So if you're a hunter, if you're an outdoorsman, you should be the first person lining up against that. What the fuck? You're taking our public lands and turning it over to corporations. So this is the trend, and it's not going to stop because they're totally bought and owned by these corporations. And I just need everybody to understand it's a fake debate going on in the country. And of course, the media is going to do a horrific job pointing out the reality of this infrastructure deal, and they're going to use it to browbeat the Democrats into being bipartisan. Hear me now, quote me later. They're gonna act like, I mean, listen, the Democrats always say they cared about infrastructure. Well, here's an opportunity. Why don't you care about infrastructure? I guess you don't care about infrastructure because you're not in favor of this deal. They're not going to get into the specifics of the deal. They're not going to break it down and give you the details to let you know why it's such a horrific move. They're just going to act like, for the sake of bipartisanship, Democrats need to make a deal with Trump on this. Okay, you want to make a deal? Here's how we're going to make a deal. Let's do a new deal. You want to do a $1.5 trillion infrastructure deal? Great. But the federal government's going to put up the $1.5 trillion. We're not going to privatize anything, and we're not going to make it a for-profit venture for any of these companies. How about that? And if you don't like that, okay, then you're not in favor of an infrastructure deal. You're in favor of a scam, a privatization racket, and we're going to call it out for what it is.